Tell us about your most humiliating work experience. 9 pairs of eyes locked onto my face. The conference room suddenly felt airless, like someone had vacuum sealed the entire space with me trapped inside. My silk blouse, the one I'd carefully steamed that morning, stuck to my back with cold sweat. "I'm sorry, what?" My voice came out steady, surprising even me. The CEO, Veronica Harlow, leaned forward in her chair, manicured fingers steepled under her chin. She wore the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. "Your most humiliating work experience," she repeated slowly, as if I hadn't understood the words rather than the audacity. "We find it helps us understand how candidates handle vulnerability." I felt it then, that familiar surge of heat crawling up my neck. Not embarrassment. Rage. Pure, molten rage that I'd spent years learning to swallow down, compress, and bury so deep that sometimes I convinced myself it wasn't there at all. I'm Meera Patel, 34, software engineer with 12 years of experience building systems that have probably touched your life in ways you don't even realize. And before I continue, if you're watching this, please hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I respond to every single one, especially when you share your own workplace horror stories. The interview with Nexus Technologies had been going well, or so I thought. 3 rounds of technical assessments, a portfolio review, and finally, this panel interview with the executive team and senior engineers. 2 hours of my life I'd never get back. "I prefer to discuss professional growth opportunities," I said carefully. "I'd be happy to talk about challenges I've overcome or how I've learned from mistakes, but—" "Meera," Veronica cut me off with a wave of her hand. "At Nexus, we value radical transparency and emotional intelligence. This question helps us gauge cultural fit. Everyone at this table has shared their stories. It's an exercise in trust." The man to her right, I think his name was Greg or Craig, nodded enthusiastically. "I told everyone about the time I sent financial projections to the entire company instead of the board. Nearly got fired." He laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. But I wasn't laughing, because I knew exactly what this was. I'd seen it before, felt it before, this performance of vulnerability that powerful people demand from those with less power. The way they disguise it as culture or trust or whatever buzzword is trending in management books that year. "I appreciate the explanation," I said, closing my portfolio slowly, deliberately, but I respectfully declined to answer that question. I believe interviews should be professional exchanges focused on qualifications and mutual fit, not exercises in personal humiliation. The silence was absolute. Someone coughed nervously. Veronica's smile tightened. "Perhaps you've misunderstood our intent." "No, I understand perfectly." I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Thank you all for your time today, but I don't think this position is the right fit for me after all." I walked out, heels clicking against the floor like tiny exclamation points. My hands didn't start shaking until I reached the elevator. 4 months without a job. 4 months of watching my savings dwindle. Of lying awake at 3 a.m., scrolling through job boards. Of smiling through video interviews while my stomach churned with anxiety. I'd left my previous position at Meridian Systems when they slashed 40% of their engineering department. Last in, first out. Classic tech industry bloodletting. I sat in my car in the Nexus parking garage for 20 minutes, just breathing. The job had seemed perfect. Senior role, good compensation, work I actually cared about. And I'd walked away from it because, what? Pride? Principles? The luxury of dignity wasn't something I could afford right now, not with rent due next week. But here's something I've learned about humiliation. It's corrosive. It eats away at you from the inside, hollowing you out until nothing remains but a shell that looks like you, talks like you, but isn't really you anymore. I'd spent too many years of my life as that hollow version of myself. I finally started the car and drove home to my apartment, a 1-bedroom in an aging building with unreliable plumbing and paper-thin walls. On the kitchen counter sat the last reminder notice for my student loans. 10 years in, and I still owed more than I'd initially borrowed thanks to the magic of capitalist interest rates. My phone pinged with a text from my sister Maya. "How'd it go?" I stared at the screen, thumbs hovering over the keyboard. What could I say? That I'd potentially thrown away financial stability over a question? That my principles might cost me my apartment? That I was simultaneously proud and terrified of what I'd done? Instead, I opened my laptop and navigated to LinkedIn. I hadn't posted anything personal there in years, just the occasional reshare of industry articles to maintain the illusion of professional engagement that recruiters seem to expect. But something in me had snapped. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was that simmering rage finally boiling over. Or maybe it was just the simple, devastating clarity that comes when you realize the game is rigged, and the only winning move is to stop playing by their rules. I typed, "Today, during the final round of interviews at a company I was excited about, the CEO asked me to share my most humiliating work experience in front of 9 team members. When I politely declined, saying I preferred to discuss professional growth, she insisted it was a culture fit question. I thanked everyone for their time and walked out. I've been job searching for 4 months. I need work. But I refuse to participate in interview practices that demand performative vulnerability while disguising it as culture. Humiliation is not a job requirement I'm willing to accept." Job search, interview experience, workplace culture. My finger hovered over the post button. This could be career suicide. Companies talk, HR departments whisper. I'd be labeled difficult, uncooperative, not a culture fit. I hit post anyway. Then I turned off notifications, drew a bath, and submerged myself until the water went cold. The thing about turning off notifications is that they're still there waiting when you turn them back on. By morning, my post had over 5,000 likes and nearly 1,000 comments. By noon, it had been shared by 3 major tech influencers. By evening, it had gone viral within the industry. Most comments were supportive, people sharing their own horror stories of inappropriate interview questions, boundary violations disguised as culture, and the subtle humiliations that have somehow become normalized in corporate America. Some weren't. Sounds like someone can't take a simple question. This is why women don't succeed in tech. Too emotional. Bet she's fun at parties. I read every single one. Then came the message from Lauren Hughes, VP of Engineering at Pinewood Software, Nexus Technologies' main competitor in the enterprise space. "Your post resonated with me. We're building a team that values professional boundaries and genuine respect. Would you be open to a conversation about our senior systems architect role? No humiliation required." My first thought was skepticism. Opportunistic PR move? Genuine interest? The line between the two is often vanishingly thin in tech. But I needed a job, and Pinewood had a solid reputation. What I didn't expect was for Veronica Harlow to call me personally the same afternoon. "Mira," she said when I answered, her voice honey, sweet with an undertone of steel. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "I don't think there has been," I replied, my heart hammering but my voice steady. "You didn't name our company in your post?" She continued as if I hadn't spoken. "But people are speculating. This kind of negative attention could damage your professional reputation as much as ours." There it was. The threat wrapped in concern. The classic move of someone used to controlling the narrative. "Are you asking me to take down my post, Veronica?" I asked directly. "I'm suggesting we have a conversation about what really happened. Perhaps we can find a way forward that benefits us both. We're still very interested in your candidacy." I almost laughed. Almost. "To clarify, you're offering me the job if I remove a post that doesn't even mention your company by name?" "I'm offering to have a conversation," she said, but her tone told me everything I needed to know. "Thank you, but I've already accepted another offer." A lie, but one that felt true the moment it left my lips. After hanging up, I immediately emailed Lauren at Pinewood, asking if we could speak as soon as possible. The interview with Pinewood was different from the start. Just 3 people, Lauren, the CTO, and a senior engineer. The questions were pointed but professional, focused on my technical knowledge, problem-solving approaches, and collaborative style. Near the end, Lauren addressed the elephant in the room. "I'm sure you're wondering if we reached out because of your post." I nodded, appreciating the directness. Partially, yes, she admitted. It caught our attention. But we've had our eye on Meridian talent since the layoffs. Your work on their distributed systems architecture was impressive. The post just accelerated our timeline. They offered me the position the next day, senior systems architect, 20% more than Nexus had discussed. With better benefits and a clear path to advancement, I accepted immediately. But the story doesn't end there. Because while I was starting my new role at Pinewood, something unexpected was happening at Nexus. Maya called me 3 weeks later, her voice hushed despite being on her lunch break. Have you seen what's happening with that company? The one with the horrible interview? I hadn't. I'd been heads down learning Pinewood systems, meeting my new team, finding my footing. 2 more people came forward with stories about their CEO, Veronica something, not just about humiliating interviews. Apparently, she's been creating a culture of fear for years. There's talk of an internal investigation. I opened Twitter and searched Veronica's name. The results made my stomach drop. Former employees were speaking out. Current employees were corroborating their stories. The board was suddenly deeply concerned and taking all allegations seriously. My post hadn't named names. It hadn't even been about Veronica specifically, just a moment where I'd finally refused to accept something unacceptable. But it had cracked open a door, and now others were walking through it. I felt complicated. There's no clean, neat word for watching the beginning of someone's downfall and knowing you played a small part in it. Not satisfaction, exactly. Not regret either. Something messier, more human. That night, I received another LinkedIn message. This one from Craig, the man who'd laughed about his financial projections mistake. I resigned today. Watching you walk out that day made me realize how much I'd normalized. Thank you for having the courage I didn't. I stared at Greg's message for a long time, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. What do you say to someone who's just upended their entire career? You're welcome, felt trivial. I'm sorry, felt wrong. I wasn't sorry. Eventually, I typed, it takes courage to walk away too. Wishing you the best on whatever comes next. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Veronica's face when I stood up from that conference table, the flash of surprise that quickly hardened into something cold and calculating. I thought about all the people who must have answered her humiliation question over the years, exposing raw wounds to prove they could be vulnerable on command. How many had walked out before me? How many had swallowed their dignity because they couldn't afford not to? Morning came with more notifications, more messages, more stories. A former Nexus project manager, Veronica once made me present quarterly results with laryngitis. When I couldn't speak above a whisper, she told the room, this is what happens when you don't prepare properly. I had pneumonia. A designer who'd left 2 years ago. During my exit interview, she asked what my therapist would say was my biggest professional weakness. When I said I wasn't comfortable sharing that, she told HR to note I was resistant to growth feedback. An administrative assistant, she made me tell the entire executive team why I needed to leave early for my son's speech therapy, then suggested I might not be committed enough for this role. Story after story after story, all different, yet sharing the same DNA. A person with power using it to make others small, to keep them afraid, to ensure they remembered their place. By the end of the week, Nexus toxic culture was trending in tech circles. The company's stock dropped 8%. Their PR team released a statement about taking all concerns seriously and conducting a thorough internal review. I watched it all unfold from my desk at Pinewood, where I was busy learning systems, meeting teammates, and deliberately not thinking about the hurricane I'd accidentally triggered. Lauren stopped by my workspace on Friday afternoon, perching on the edge of my desk. Holding up okay? It's a lot to step into a new role while being at the center of an industry firestorm. I looked up from my monitor, surprised. You've seen all that? She raised an eyebrow. Everyone's seen it. You know, tech has the memory of an elephant and the gossip network of a small-town high school. I laughed despite myself. I'm fine. Or I will be. It's just strange. I didn't set out to destroy anyone's career or tank a company's stock price. I just refused to be humiliated. Lauren nodded. That's often how change starts. Not with grand plans, but with one person saying no when they're expected to say yes. She stood up. Take the weekend off, clear your head. Monday will still be here with all its problems waiting to be solved. But clearing my head proved impossible. Saturday morning, I woke to an email from a journalist at TechCrunch requesting an interview about the systemic issues in tech interview practices and my role in exposing the toxic culture at Nexus Technologies. I declined politely. 3 more requests came in before noon. I turned off my phone and went for a long walk through the park near my apartment. The fall air was crisp, leaves crunching underfoot, the world going about its normal Saturday business, kids playing soccer, couples walking dogs, a group of older women practicing Tai Chi by the pond. None of them knew or cared about Nexus Technologies or viral LinkedIn posts or tech industry drama. I sat on a bench and watched a squirrel frantically burying acorns for the coming winter. Was I like that squirrel, storing up security against future scarcity? Is that why I couldn't just let this all go and focus on my new job, my fresh start? My phone buzzed in my pocket. I'd forgotten to turn it back on. The number wasn't one I recognized. Hello? Is this Mira Patel? A woman's voice unfamiliar. Yes. Who's calling? My name is Diane Reynolds. I'm the board chair at Nexus Technologies. My blood went cold. I almost hung up. Almost. Miss Patel, first, I want to apologize for calling you on a weekend and for obtaining your number through unconventional channels. I said nothing, waiting. I'd like to meet with you, if possible, in person. There are matters we need to discuss regarding recent events. If this is about my LinkedIn post, it's about much more than that now, she interrupted, her voice tight. As I'm sure you're aware. I considered my options. Refuse and wonder forever what she wanted to say. Agree and potentially walk into a trap? Record the conversation? Bring a lawyer? When and where? I finally asked. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., the Four Seasons downtown. I'll be in the lobby. She hung up before I could respond. I spent the rest of Saturday alternating between anxiety, righteous anger, and calling Maya for increasingly panicked advice. They're going to sue you, she insisted during our third call. Don't go without a lawyer. They can't sue me for telling the truth, I countered, though my stomach twisted at the thought. I didn't even name them. Rich people don't need reasons to sue, Mira. They just need to be angry. In the end, I decided to meet Diane, but in public, and I'd record the conversation on my phone. California is a 2-party consent state, so I'd tell her I was recording. If she objected, I'd leave. Sunday morning dawned gray and drizzling. I dressed carefully. Black pants, burgundy blouse, the blazer I'd worn to countless interviews, armor of a sort. The Four Seasons lobby was all marble and muted luxury. Diane Reynolds was easy to spot, a woman in her 60s with a silver bob and the unmistakable posture of someone accustomed to authority. She sat in a corner arrangement of plush chairs, a pot of tea on the table before her. Miss Patel. She stood as I approached, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, dry. Thank you for coming. I'm recording this conversation, I said immediately, placing my phone on the table between us. For my protection. She nodded once, unsurprised. Understandable, may I? She gestured to the teapot. I nodded, and she poured 2 cups, her movements precise and controlled. I'll be direct, she said, setting down the pot. The board has terminated Veronica Harlow's employment effective immediately. Whatever I'd been expecting, it wasn't this. I worked to keep my expression neutral. The concerns raised following your experience and prompted us to conduct interviews with current and former employees. What we found was, she paused, choosing her words carefully, deeply troubling. A pattern of behavior inconsistent with our values and potentially exposing the company to significant liability. I see, I said, though I didn't, not really. Why tell me this in person? We're implementing a complete overhaul of our HR practices, particularly around hiring and employee relations. She sipped her tea. Which brings me to why I asked to meet you. Here it comes, I thought. The threat, the lawsuit, the demand for silence. We would like to contract you as a consultant on this initiative. I nearly choked on my tea. Excuse me? Your perspective would be invaluable in rebuilding our culture and practices. You've experienced firsthand the problems we're trying to correct. Who better to help ensure we don't repeat those mistakes? The irony was so thick I could barely breathe through it. Let me get this straight. You want to hire me, the person whose post triggered the expose of your company's toxic culture, to help fix that culture? Yes. No hesitation. No hint of embarrassment. Why would I do that? Because meaningful change rarely happens from the outside. It requires people willing to come in and do the hard work. She leaned forward. And because we're prepared to compensate you very generously for your time and expertise. I laughed then, a short, sharp sound that caused a nearby hotel guest to glance our way. You think this is about money? No. I think it's about change. Real change. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a folder. Here's our proposal. Review it. Consider it. Talk to your lawyer if you have one. You don't need to decide now. I took the folder without opening it. One more thing, she added, standing to signal our meeting was ending. Whatever you decide, we will not pursue any legal action regarding your social media posts or the subsequent fallout. That was Veronica's approach, not the board's. I stood too, tucking the folder under my arm. Thank you for the tea, Ms. Reynolds. Diane, please. Thank you for the tea, Diane. I'll consider your offer. I didn't open the folder until I was home, curled up on my couch with a glass of wine and Maya on speakerphone. $50,000 for 10 weeks of consulting. I read aloud. 2 meetings per week, reviewing and redesigning their hiring practices and employee relations policies. Holy shit, Maya breathed. That's on top of your Pinewood job? Yes, evenings and occasional weekends. Are you going to do it? I stared at the contract. I don't know. And I didn't. Part of me wanted to throw the folder in the trash, to walk away completely and focus on my new role at Pinewood. Another part recognized the rare opportunity to create real change from the inside, to help build something better on the ruins of what Veronica had created. The next morning, I asked Lauren for a meeting. Nexus offered me a consulting contract, I told her, laying out the whole strange saga. I wanted to be transparent with you before making a decision. Lauren listened without interrupting, fingers steepled under her chin, the same gesture Veronica had used, but somehow entirely different. What do you want to do? She asked when I finished. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me thinks it's a trap. Part of me thinks it's an opportunity to make things better for future employees. Part of me thinks it's not my problem to fix. She nodded. All valid perspectives. From Pinewood's standpoint, there's no conflict of interest. We have different market segments. As long as it doesn't impact your work here, I have no objections. I took a deep breath. What would you do? She considered for a moment. I'd go in, change what I could, take their money, and donate it to organizations that help workplace abuse victims. A smile flickered across her face. But that's just me. 2 days later, I signed Diane's contract. With a few modifications. I would consult for 12 weeks, not 10. I would have full access to all HR complaints filed in the past 5 years. And I would have final approval on any hiring practices implemented as a result of my recommendations. To my surprise, they agreed to everything. The work was hard, messy, and often deeply uncomfortable. I interviewed dozens of employees, pored over years of HR records, and sat through meetings where executives who'd enabled Veronica's behavior for years suddenly positioned themselves as champions of change. But change did happen, slowly, imperfectly, with resistance and setbacks and the occasional breakthrough. They eliminated culture fit questions entirely, implemented standardized interview protocols focused on skills and experience, created anonymous reporting channels for workplace concerns, brought in diversity consultants to address the glaring homogeneity of their upper management. When my contract ended, Diane offered to extend it. I declined. The foundation is built, I told her during our final meeting. The rest is up to you. 6 months later, I was promoted to principal architect at Pinewood. The day Lauren told me the news, she also handed me a printout, a job posting from Nexus for a UX designer. The interview process section mentioned standardized, skills-based assessment and professional, respectful questioning. Looks like your work's stuck, she said. That night, I finally wrote back to Craig, whose message had sat in my inbox all these months. How's life after Nexus? I asked. His reply came quickly. Started my own consulting firm. Smaller projects, better hours, no more Sunday night dread. You? Good, I wrote back. Really good. And it was. Not perfect, work never is. But better, different, changed. I'd walked into that Nexus interview as someone who swallowed rage until it hollowed me out. I'd walked out as someone who finally refused to be hollowed anymore. That refusal, that simple, terrifying act of standing up and walking away, had rippled outward in ways I never could have predicted. It had changed Nexus. It had changed the lives of people I'd never met. Most importantly, it had changed me. The following week, I spoke at a Women in Tech conference about healthy workplace boundaries. The room was packed. During the Q&A, a young engineer raised her hand. Weren't you afraid? She asked. When you walked out of that interview, when everything blew up afterward, weren't you scared of what would happen? I thought about it carefully. Yes, I finally answered. I was terrified. But I've learned something important. Sometimes the thing you're most afraid to do is exactly the thing you need to do. Not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. She nodded, writing something down in her notebook. After the talk, I checked my phone. Another LinkedIn notification, a message from a name I didn't recognize. I interviewed at Nexus last week. They asked about my technical background, my approach to problem solving, my experience with distributed systems. Professional, respectful, focused on what matters. I start Monday. I heard you had something to do with changing their culture. Thank you. I smiled and put my phone away. Some revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes the best revenge is creating something better from the ruins of what hurt you. Not just for yourself, but for everyone who follows in your footsteps. And that kind of revenge, it doesn't hollow you out. It fills you up.